Imagine this. What happens to the world if America stops paying its debts one day? Would the global economy seize up in less than 2 days? Do banks start saying, "Please wait," and markets spiral into crisis? Sounds exaggerated, I know. But could the dollars in your wallet suddenly lose value, turning into little more than newsprint? Welcome to Finance Past to Present, where money, power, and history are always tightly intertwined. What we call U.S. debt isn't just a number. It's the invisible skeleton that carries daily life. From the bread you buy at the bakery to the loan you take from the bank. If that skeleton starts to creak, it stops being an American issue and becomes an earthquake that shakes the entire world. So let's begin. Take a quick trip through time. In 1790, young America was drowning in war debt. Normally, countries in that situation give up and default, but Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton did the opposite. "Let's borrow and keep our word," he said. His strategy was simple. If you borrow regularly and pay reliably, you earn trust in the markets. The world's view of your currency changes, and your reputation rises. Reputation is hard to win, but easy to lose. By applying this strategy, America issued its own government bonds and paid its debts. The world said, "All right, these people are trustworthy." Freedom in America wasn't won by war alone. By paying its debts, the U.S. earned something priceless. A global reputation for honoring its obligations. What followed came like a loose thread unraveling the whole scarf. Railroads, the Industrial Revolution, the New Deal, World War II. In all of this, America grew by borrowing. In 1944 at Bretton Woods, the dollar became the world's reserve currency. Everything was tied to the dollar, and the dollar was tied to gold. Money in people's pockets across the globe rested on America's promise. "Don't worry, I'm strong, I keep my word, I pay my debts." When the wars ended, most of the world's gold and factories were in the U.S. Confidence in the dollar hit the ceiling. Countries stockpiled dollars, and U.S. treasuries became, in a sense, the world's piggy bank. But that confidence wouldn't last forever. By the late 1960s, demand for dollars was overflowing, and gold couldn't keep up. Gold comes from the ground. Dollars come from the printing press. In 1971, Nixon severed the link between the dollar and gold. From that day on, the dollar's value rested entirely on trust. Gold was gone, but there was trust in treasury bonds. Banks used treasuries as collateral, pension funds leaned on them for stability, and central banks filled their vaults with them. What we call national debt was actually the system's main backbone. When old bonds matured, new ones were issued. Debt wasn't paid off. It was rolled over. Think of it like a bicycle. As long as the wheels keep turning, the system runs. So what happens if the chain slips? Missing even a single payment would mean the safest stone in the wall has shifted. Liquidity flees, banks eye each other with suspicion, and the dollar drops fast. In 1979, just a few days of technical delay sent interest rates spiking. In 2011, debt levels climbed so high that the U.S. lost its AAA credit rating. Within weeks, trillions in market value evaporated. These weren't no-cash crises, they were crises of confidence. Here's the curious part. America's most powerful export is its word. Other countries sell goods. The U.S. sells bonds. Each bond becomes someone else's reserve, someone else's safety cushion. Here's the paradox. The U.S. doesn't need to eliminate its debt. It needs to sustain it. The world constantly demands dollars and uses them. If you said, let's pay off every last dollar of debt and close the book, you'd be removing the pillars that hold the system up, and that would mean collapse. Fast forward to today. As the headline number grows, so does the interest bill. Annual interest is nearly as large as America's defense budget. Politics turns the debt ceiling into a bargaining chip, and everyone gets nervous. Some countries trim their treasury holdings and turn to gold. Others experiment with trade outside the dollar. Tiny cracks are appearing in the confidence column. It's not a shortage of money, it's a shortage of consensus. And let's be honest. If one day we couldn't pay were ever announced, it wouldn't start with sirens on the street. It would arrive in a calm line of a press release. Technical issue. And then many would say, the thing we said would never happen just happened. In the first hours, markets would freeze. Treasuries are like the pressure in the pipes of global finance. When a die drops, the flow stops. Stocks fall, not because companies are suddenly worthless, but because the ground is shaking. Central banks scramble for shields. The dollar slides. Rates shoot up. Everything from credit cards to mortgages to auto loans gets more expensive overnight. Even government payrolls can stumble, not weeks, days, and the global pulse goes irregular. The core issue is still the same, not money, but trust. The U.S. can print money, but it can't print confidence. History says a currency lasts only as long as the belief behind it. When that belief fades, even the heaviest metal feels feather light in our hands. Who replaces the dollar, you might ask? Trust doesn't pass like a flag in a ceremony. A new reserve currency doesn't appear overnight. First comes a long uncertainty. Every transaction costs more because nobody is sure about value. Default isn't the end of money. It's the blurring of meaning. There's also the domestic politics. The U.S. can pay its bills. It has the technical capacity. But if politics locks up, the result mirrors mathematical default. The brushes with crisis in 2011 and 2023 were almost moments. Each almost chips a little more at confidence. As the interest burden swells, resources go to paying for promises of the past instead of building the future. Sustainability looks shakier. The most dangerous thing is complacency. It's always worked before. It'll work again. In the late phases of empires, money can become a cosmetic that covers for fading confidence. Inflation rises, the currency weakens, and the world slowly diversifies. That's what we're living through now. Not a great collapse, but a quiet diversification. People aren't fighting the dollar. They're gently reducing their dependence on it. In short, a default tomorrow may be unlikely, but the yearly political brinkmanship fattens the risk of one day. America's power came from a paradox. Limitless debt carried by limitless confidence. For now, confidence still stands. Bonds sell, the dollar dominates. But confidence is an asset too. Overuse wears it down. If the day ever comes when we can't pay, the damage wouldn't just be breaking a promise to creditors. It would be breaking a promise to history. Because the world doesn't run on money, it runs on trust. And trust is the one currency no one can print. If this opened a new window for you, hit subscribe. History repeats itself, and together we'll dive into the stories that make us wonder, hesitate, and ask, could this really happen? Our job is to shed light on those moments.